Okay, so ready to really get into it today.
Yeah, let's do it.
We are diving deep into the Barbarian in the 2024 edition.
The Barbarian, yeah, are a really cool class.
So this is for the player who wants to really get a handle on what this class is all about, how to play it most effectively, and to understand the changes from the 2014 edition.
Yeah, to really get in depth and see what makes this iconic class tick.
Yeah, so to start off at the very basic level, what is a Barbarian?
At its core, the Barbarian is that classic image of the, raging warrior fueled by primal fury. They're incredibly durable. They're a martial powerhouse, and they can deal just a devastating amount of damage really quickly.
Right, so not a lot of subtlety here.
Not a whole lot of subtlety. No, you're not going to see a barbarian, hiding in the shadows. They're going to be right in the thick of it, soaking up damage, dealing it out, and really being that kind of anchor for the party.
Right, and thinking about their role in the party, they can really fit into a couple of different roles.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So in the kind of classic D&D paradigms, you can think of them as both a defender and a striker. They can protect their allies by drawing enemy attacks, and then they can just unleash those brutal attacks of their own.
Right, and for those who might be familiar with the 2014 edition, the 2024 edition brings some pretty significant changes, right?
Yes, definitely. There are some really cool updates both to the core class features and to the primal paths, which are the subclasses for the barbarians. We're going to get into all of that. And I think there's going to be some real aha moments for people as we go through these changes and see how they really improve and refine the whole barbarian experience.
Cool, so let's get into those core class features then. What are we talking about when we're building a Barbarian in 2024?
So right out of the gate, you're looking at a D12 hit die, which is the best hit die in the game.
The best there is.
Absolutely. That means from level 1, you're going to be able to soak up a ton of damage and really be that frontline presence. You're also proficient in strength and constitution saving throws, which is super important for a frontliner.
Makes sense. You're going to be the one in the middle of all those nasty spells and effects.
Exactly. And constitution saving throws in particular come up a lot, so that proficiency is going to save your bacon more times than you can count.
And of course, proficiencies in armor and weapons as well.
Yep. You get proficiency with martial weapons, which covers pretty much all the classic barbarian weapons you can think of. And you can wear medium armor, so you have a good balance of protection and mobility.
But I did notice they don't get a ton of tool proficiencies, and their initial skill selection is a bit limited.
That's right. They're not really built to be the party's skill monkey, at least not initially. They're focused on combat, first and foremost.
Right, so that's something to keep in mind if you're envisioning a barbarian who's also like a master craftsman or something.
Exactly. Now let's talk about the barbarian's signature ability, their rage. This is what really defines the class, and it's seen some really interesting improvements in 2024.
Yeah, I was looking at this, and one thing that stood out to me immediately was the duration, 10 minutes.
10 minutes, yeah. It's a huge jump from the 1-minute duration in 2014, so you can stay enraged for a much longer period of time, which really improves your sustained combat presence.
Yeah, that's huge, especially for those longer encounters, or if you're in a dungeon crawl where you're fighting multiple groups of enemies back to back.
And not only is the duration longer, but the ways to maintain your rage are also more flexible now.
Oh, really? How so?
So in addition to the classic ways of attacking or taking damage to keep your rage going, you can now also extend it by making a successful saving throw or by using a bonus action.
Interesting. So that gives you a lot more control over when and how you want to use your rage.
Exactly. You're not as reliant on just getting hit or constantly attacking to stay enraged. You have more options, and that makes a big difference strategically.
I like that. And the damage bonus you get while raging has also changed, right?
Yes, it used to be limited to only melee weapon attacks, but now it applies to any strength-based attack.
So that includes ranged weapons?
Exactly. So you could be a raging barbarian chucking javelins or hand axes and still get that damage bonus. It really opens up some interesting build possibilities.
I like that it adds some versatility to the class without taking away from their core identity as a melee powerhouse.
Right, you're probably not going to see a barbarian built entirely around ranged combat, but it's definitely nice to have that option in specific situations.
Absolutely. And of course, you still get resistance to all that damage while you're raging.
Oh, yeah. You get resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage, which makes you incredibly tough to take down. It's part of what makes the barbarian such a durable frontliner.
But you still need to be careful with how you use your rage, right?
Definitely, it's still a limited resource. You only have a certain number of uses per day, so you don't want to just burn them all on minor encounters.
Right. You need to pick your moments and use your rage strategically.
Exactly. Now let's talk about unarmored defense. This is a feature that lets you forego wearing armor and instead use your dexterity and constitution modifiers to calculate your armor class.
Yeah, I always like the idea of a barbarian fighting in, like, just furs and leather or something, really embracing that primal aesthetic.
It definitely fits the image, right? But the question is, how does it actually stack up against wearing armor in terms of effectiveness?
That's a good point. I mean, you can always just strap on some half plate and call it a day.
Right. So to actually equal the AC of half plate, which is a common benchmark for martial characters, you'd need a combined dexterity and constitution modifier of at least +7.
So that's pretty high, especially at lower levels.
It is, yeah. Realistically, you're probably not going to reach that until maybe around level 8, depending on your starting stats. And even then, you're just matching the AC of half plate, not exceeding it.
So if you really want to go all in on unarmored defense, you'd need to prioritize those dexterity and constitution scores pretty heavily.
Exactly. And you might even consider multi-classing with another class that also benefits from those stats, like a monk or a rogue.
Interesting.
Right.
So it's not just a matter of choosing the feature you really need to build your character around it to make it effective.
Yeah. Right. And then there's the question of magic items.
Yeah, because you can always just find some magical armor that gives you a flat bonus to your AC.
Exactly. And that's where unarmored defense can kind of fall behind a bit because magical armor is just so straightforward and reliable.
So it's something to keep in mind. If you're going for that unarmored look, you might need to get creative with finding magic items that complement your build.
Absolutely. Now let's move on to another really interesting feature that's new in 2024, not just for barbarians, but for all classes, and that's weapon mastery.
Yeah, this is what I was really curious about. What does this mean for a barbarian, tactically?
So at first level, you get to choose 2 weapon masteries for any weapons you are proficient with, and these masteries are essentially special properties that give you more options during combat.
So, for example, if I'm playing a barbarian and my weapon of choice is the classic great axe, what kind of masteries might I want to pick?
Well, with a great axe, you might consider taking the cleave mastery, which lets you potentially hit a second target if your first attack connects.
So more enemies, more damage.
Exactly. Or you could go for something like the push mastery, which lets you shove a creature 5 feet away on a hit.
I can see that being really useful for creating space for your allies or knocking an enemy off a ledge or something.
Right, or even just pushing them into a hazardous area, like a pit of fire or something like that.
Yeah, the tactical possibilities are really cool. And you don't even have to limit yourself to just melee weapons, right?
Nope. Any weapon you're proficient with can have masteries. So, for example, even though you're probably going to focus on melee combat as a barbarian, you might consider picking up a trident.
A trident. Okay, why?
Well, because the trident has the topple mastery, which lets you knock flying enemies prone when you hit them.
Ah, so you can bring those pesky flying enemies down to your level.
Exactly, and then you can wade in and finish them off.
I love that it really encourages you to think outside the box and consider different weapons and strategies.
Absolutely. Now, moving on to level 2, you gain danger sense, which is a pretty straightforward but valuable feature.
Yeah, pretty self-explanatory. You get advantage on dexterity saving throws.
Right, which is really important for a barbarian because they don't typically have high dexterity, and they're not proficient in those saves. So that advantage can be a lifesaver, literally.
Yeah, especially when you're up against spellcasters and other enemies that love to use area of effect attacks.
Exactly. It helps you avoid those big fireballs and lightning bolts.
And also at level 2 is Reckless Attack, another one of the barbarian's signature abilities. But this one has also seen some changes, right?
Yes, it used to be that the advantage you gained on attack rolls only lasted for the duration of your turn, but now it lasts until the start of your next turn.
So that means it applies to opportunity attacks now.
Exactly, which is a big improvement because barbarians are often in a position to make opportunity attacks.
Right, so if an enemy tries to run away from me after I've used Reckless Attack, I can still hit them with advantage.
Yep, it makes Reckless Attack much more potent and versatile, but of course the trade-off is still there.
Right, enemies still get advantage on their attacks against you.
Up until the start of your next turn. So it's a risk-reward mechanic, but the reward is definitely greater now.
And that's where those weapon masteries can come in handy again.
Exactly. For example, the Sap Mastery lets you impose disadvantage on an enemy's next attack roll if you hit them. So that can help mitigate the risk of using Reckless Attack.
I like that it gives you more tools to manage that risk and make informed decisions during combat.
Right. It's all about weighing the pros and cons and choosing the best option for the situation.
Now, at level 3, we see Primal Knowledge, which seems to be designed to address the barbarian's limited skill versatility.
It is you gain an extra skill proficiency of your choice, so you can branch out a bit beyond just combat skills.
So maybe I could finally have a barbarian who's good at persuasion or something.
It's possible, but the real gem of primal knowledge is that while you're raging, you can use your strength modifier for a bunch of different skill checks.
Oh, like which ones?
You can use it for acrobatics, intimidation, perception, stealth, and survival.
Wow, that's a lot of skills suddenly becoming much more viable for a strength-focused character.
Right, and you also get advantage on all strength checks while raging, so that makes those skills even more reliable.
I can imagine a raging barbarian using their strength to, like, climb a wall or intimidate a guard or something.
Exactly. It really opens up some interesting possibilities, both in and out of combat.
But you do need to be mindful of your rage uses, right? Because spending a rage just for a skill check might not always be the best idea.
True. It depends on the situation. If it's a really important check and you need to succeed, then it might be worth it, but you don't want to waste your rage if you're going to need it for combat later on.
Right. It's all about that strategic resource management that we talked about earlier.
Exactly. Now at level 5, we get to the big one, extra attack.
More attacks, more damage, the classic martial class power spike.
It's a game changer for sure. As a barbarian, you're all about dealing damage, and now you get to do it twice per turn.
And that means more chances to apply those rage damage bonuses and weapon mastery effects.
Precisely, you're becoming a real force to be reckoned with at this point, and it only gets better from here.
And you also get fast movement at level 5.
Right? Your speed increases by 5 feet as long as you're not wearing heavy armor.
So you can close the distance on those enemies even faster.
Exactly. Which is crucial for a melee class like the barbarian. You need to get into the thick of things quickly.
And then at level 7, we have Feral Instinct.
This gives you advantage on initiative rolls, which is huge for a barbarian because it means you're more likely to act first in combat.
I can see why that would be important. You want to get in there and start swinging before the enemy can react.
Exactly. And it pairs really well with another feature you get at level 7, Instinctive Bounce.
Which lets you move half your speed when you enter your rage.
Exactly. So you can rage and then immediately close the distance on an enemy before they even have a chance to move.
That's a really cool combo. That makes the barbarian even more aggressive and mobile.
Right. They're all about getting in your face and wreaking havoc.
Now at level 9, we come to a pretty significant change. Brutal Critical is out, and Brutal Strike is in.
Yep. This is a really interesting update. Brutal Critical used to be just about adding extra damage dice on a critical hit, but Brutal Strike is a lot more versatile.
How so?
Well, with Brutal Strike, you can choose to give up any advantage you have on an attack roll in order to add 1d10 damage to the attack. And then you can also apply one of 2 special effects.
Interesting. So you're trading a higher chance to hit for guaranteed damage and an extra effect.
Exactly. And the effects are really cool, too. You can either use Forceful Blow, which lets you push the target 15 feet away and then move up to half your speed towards them without provoking opportunity attacks.
So you can really reposition enemies and disrupt their formations.
Exactly. Or you can use Hamstring Blow, which reduces the target's speed by 15 feet.
Ah, so you can slow them down and make them easier to catch.
Right, it gives you a lot more control over the battlefield.
And then level 11, we get Relentless Rage, which is just so quintessentially barbarian.
It really is. It basically lets you refuse to die. If you're reduced to 0 hit points but not killed outright while you're raging, you can make a Constitution saving throw, and if you succeed, you drop to 1 hit point instead of falling unconscious.
Wow, so you can just keep fighting even when you're on death's door.
Exactly. It's like that classic image of the barbarian just shrugging off wounds and continuing to battle.
But it's not a foolproof plan, right?
No, the saving throw DC increases each time you use it before finishing a long rest, so it gets harder and harder to stay up.
So you can't just rely on it all the time. You still need to be smart and avoid taking too much damage.
Right. But it's definitely a powerful tool to have in your back pocket, especially in those clutch moments.
And then at level 13, Improved Brutal Strike gives you even more options for that level 9 feature.
Yep. You get 2 additional effects that you can choose from, Staggering Blow and Sunburn Blow.
What do those do?
Staggering Blow imposes disadvantage on the target's next saving throw.
So you can set them up for a nasty spell or effect.
Exactly, and Sundering Blow gives advantage on the next attack roll made against the target by one of your allies.
Ah, so you can help your team deal more damage.
Right. It's a nice way to support your party while still being a damage-dealing powerhouse yourself.
And then at level 15, we get Persistent Rage, which is a huge boost to the barbarian's staying power.
It is once per day when you finish a short or long rest, you regain all your expended rage uses.
Wow, so you can basically rage all day long.
Pretty much. And on top of that, while you're raging, you no longer need to attack or take damage to maintain your rage unless you're incapacitated.
That's a big change. It gives you so much more freedom to use your rage strategically.
You're not as limited by the need to constantly be in the thick of things. You can use your rage more for tactical purposes, and it's especially useful for those longer encounters or if you need to maintain your rage outside of combat.
Right, like if you need to intimidate someone or break down a door.
Exactly. It makes the barbarian a much more versatile and adaptable class.
And then at level 17, we get another improvement to Brutal Strike.
More damage, more options. It's the barbarian way.
So what's new this time?
Well, first of all, you add another D10 damage to your brutal strike attacks, so they're even more devastating.
Ouch. And that's on top of the original D10.
Yep. And then on top of that, you can now choose to apply 2 brutal strike effects with a single attack.
Wow. So you could push an enemy back and reduce their speed all at once?
Exactly. Or you could stagger them and sunder them, making them an easy target for your allies.
The possibilities are endless. Like you're a walking tactical nuke at this point.
You're a force of nature, that's for sure.
And then at level 18, we have Indomitable Might.
This feature makes it so that when you're raging, the lowest you can roll on a strength check is your strength score.
So basically, you can't fail a strength check while you're enraged.
Pretty much, especially at higher levels where your strength is likely to be 20 or even higher.
That's incredible. It makes you incredibly reliable for anything that requires raw physical power.
Lifting gates, breaking down doors, grappling enemies, you name it, you can do it.
And finally, at level 20, we reach the pinnacle of Barbarian Power Primal Champion.
The capstone feature the ultimate expression of the barbarian's strength and resilience.
And what does it do?
It increases both your strength and your constitution by 4.
Wow. So you're talking about potential scores of 24 or even 25?
That's right. You are an absolute monster at this point, both in terms of damage output and survivability.
A fitting capstone for the barbarian's journey.
It really is. Now, let's move on to the primal paths. These are the subclasses that let you further specialize your barbarian and really lean into a specific theme or playstyle.
Right, in the 2024 edition, we have 4 different primal paths to choose from. The path of the Berserker, the path of the Wild Heart, the path of the World Tree, and the path of the Zealot.
Each one offers a unique set of abilities and features that really change how you play the barbarian.
So let's go through them one by one, starting with the Berserker. I feel like that's the one that most people think of when they hear the word barbarian.
Yeah, the classic image of the wild-eyed frothing at the mouth warrior.
It's exactly. So what does a Berserker bring to the table in 2024?
Well, their signature feature frenzy has been completely redesigned, and it's a lot more appealing now.
What was wrong with it before?
Well, in the 2014 edition, using frenzy gave you levels of exhaustion, which could really cripple you in the long run.
Right, exhaustion is no joke. It can really mess up your character.
But in 2024, they got rid of the exhaustion penalty entirely.
Wow, that's huge. So now it's just pure unadulterated rage.
Pretty much while you're raging and you use reckless attack, the first weapon attack you hit on each of your turns deals extra damage equal to the number you roll on your rage damage die.
So you're basically doubling down on your recklessness and getting rewarded for it with even more damage.
Exactly. It makes the Berserker a truly terrifying offensive force, especially if you're willing to take those risks.
And they also get some cool defensive abilities, right?
At level 6, they gain Mindless Rage, which makes them immune to being charmed or frightened while raging, and it also suppresses those conditions if you're already affected by them when you enter your rage.
So they're really hard to control or manipulate.
They're a force of nature. You can't reason with them. You can't scare them. They're just going to keep coming at you.
And at level 10, they get Retaliation,
which lets them make a melee weapon attack as a reaction against any enemy that damages them while they're raging.
So you hit me. I hit you back twice as hard.
Exactly. It's a great way to punish enemies for focusing on you, and it can also deter them from attacking you in the first place.
And finally, at level 14, they get Intimidating Presence,
which has been updated to be a bonus action now, so it's much easier to use.
Nice. What does it do?
You can attempt to frighten a creature within 30 feet of you, and if they fail a wisdom saving throw, they're frightened of you for a minute.
So you could basically scare the wits out of your enemies.
Especially with advantage on the saving throw from your rage, it's a really potent ability, and it can be used for crowd control or to single out a specific target.
So the Berserker is still that classic rage-fueled damage dealer, but they're even more powerful and reliable now without the downside of exhaustion.
They're a great option for players who want to really embrace that primal fury and just unleash chaos on the battlefield.
Now let's move on to the Path of the Wild Heart. This one seems to be all about connecting with nature and channeling the power of animals.
Exactly. They're like the druidic version of the barbarian, embracing the wildness of the natural world.
And this one replaces the Path of the Totem Warrior from the 2014 edition, right?
It does. It's kind of a spiritual successor, but it's more customizable and versatile.
So how does it work?
Well, at third level, you get Animal Speaker, which lets you cast the Beast Sense and speak with animals' spells as rituals.
Useful for any campaign that involves interacting with animals.
Definitely. And then also at third level, you get the core feature of this subclass, Rage of the Wild.
And this is where the animal powers come in, right?
Exactly. Each time you enter a rage, you choose one of 3 different effects: bear, eagle, or wolf.
Okay, let's break those down. What does the bear effect do?
Bear gives you resistance to a ton of different damage types: bludgeoning, piercing, slashing, force, necrotic, and radiant.
Wow, that's like almost everything.
Pretty much it makes you incredibly durable against a wide range of threats.
And what about eagle?
Eagle gives you the ability to dash and disengage as a bonus action on each of your turns while you're raging.
So you're incredibly mobile. You can zip around the battlefield and avoid getting pinned down.
Exactly. It's great for hit-and-run tactics or for repositioning yourself to protect your allies.
And finally, wolf.
Wolf gives all your allies within 5 feet of you advantage on attack rolls against the creature you're raging against.
So you're basically a walking buff for your team.
Exactly. You're making it easier for them to hit and deal damage, which can be incredibly powerful, especially if you have other martial classes in your party.
So you have a lot of different options depending on what the situation calls for.
Right. You can tailor your rage to the specific challenge you're facing, whether you need more defense, more mobility, or more support for your allies.
And then at 6th level, you get Aspect of the Wilds.
Which gives you a passive benefit that lasts until your next long rest.
So it's not something you have to activate or manage. It's just always there.
Exactly. And you have 3 options to choose from: Owl, Panther, or Salmon.
Okay, so Owl gives you dark vision, or increases its range if you already have it.
Makes sense for a nature-themed subclass, and if you already have it from another source, it just extends the range.
Yeah, so it's never a wasted choice.
And then Panther gives you a climb speed equal to your walking speed.
So you can scale walls and trees with ease.
Exactly. Perfect for navigating those dense forests and mountainous terrains.
And salmon.
Salmon gives you a swim speed equal to your walking speed.
So you're equally comfortable on land and in water.
Exactly. The Wild Heart is all about being adaptable and able to thrive in any environment.
And then at 10th level, we have Nature Speaker, which was called Spirit Walker in the 2014 edition.
But it functions the same way. It lets you cast the Commune with Nature spell as a ritual.
So you can learn about the surrounding environment and track down specific creatures or locations.
Exactly. It's a great tool for exploration and wilderness survival.
And finally, at 14th level, we get Power of the Wilds, which is another set of choices that activate each time you enter a rage.
Yep. This time the options are Falcon Lion or Ram.
Okay, so Falcon gives you a fly speed.
Equal to your walking speed, so you can take to the skies and engage those flying enemies.
Very cool Lion.
Lion is similar to the Bear Totem ability from the 2014 edition. It lets you knock creatures prone on a hit.
So you can control the battlefield and create opportunities for your allies.
Exactly. And Ram lets you knock a creature prone without a saving throw when you hit them with a melee attack.
Wow, so it's guaranteed to work.
As long as you hit them, yep, it's a very powerful ability, especially against enemies that rely on mobility.
So the Wild Heart is an incredibly versatile subclass. You can really tailor it to your playstyle and the specific needs of your party.
They're a great option for players who like to have a lot of options and be able to adapt to any situation.
Now let's move on to a brand new subclass, the Path of the World Tree. This one sounds really interesting.
It's a very unique take on the Barbarian, focusing more on support and control than just raw damage.
Interesting. So how does it work?
Well, at third level, you get Vitality of the Tree, which has 2 parts: Vitality Surge and Life-Giving Force.
Okay, what do those do?
Vitality Surge gives you temporary hit points at the start of each of your rages. The amount scales with your level, so it's always relevant.
So you're even tougher than usual.
Exactly. And then Life-Giving Force lets you grant temporary hit points to an ally within 10 feet of you at the start of each of your turns while raging.
Ah, so you're like a walking shield for your party.
Exactly. You're protecting them from harm and keeping them in the fight.
But you can't use it on yourself, right?
Nope. It has to be an ally, which really emphasizes the supportive nature of this subclass.
And then at 6th level, you get Branches of the Tree.
Which is a really cool control ability as a reaction. You can teleport a creature within 30 feet of you to a space within 5 feet of you.
So you can pull enemies closer to you or push them away.
You can also reposition your allies to get them out of danger or set up flanking maneuvers.
Wow, that's incredibly versatile.
And you can even reduce the teleported creature's speed to 0 until the end of their turn.
So you can really lock them down and prevent them from moving.
It's a great way to control the battlefield and protect your allies.
And then at 10th level, you get battering roots.
Which makes your heavy and versatile weapons even more formidable.
How so?
Well, first of all, it increases their reach by 10 feet, so you can attack from even further away.
Nice.
And then it also gives them the push and topple weapon mastery properties while you're raging.
So you can shove enemies back and knock them prone, all with a single attack.
Exactly. It's incredible battlefield control. You can really manipulate the positioning of your enemies.
And finally, at 14th level, you get travel along the tree.
Which is all about teleportation.
More teleportation. Okay, how does this one work?
Well, as a bonus action, you can teleport yourself up to 60 feet to an unoccupied space.
So you can really get around the battlefield quickly.
And once per rage, you can teleport yourself and up to 6 willing creatures within 30 feet of you to a location up to 150 feet away.
Wow, so you can reposition your entire party in an instant.
Exactly. It's incredibly powerful for escaping dangerous situations or setting up ambushes.
So the World Tree is all about controlling the battlefields and protecting your allies.
They're a unique and valuable addition to any party, and they offer a very different playstyle from the other barbarian subclasses.
Finally, let's talk about the Path of the Zealot. This one seems to be all about divine fury and righteous wrath.
Exactly. They're the holy warriors of the barbarian world, channeling their rage into divine power.
And they're incredibly tough, right?
Oh yeah, at 3rd level they get Divine Fury, which adds extra radiant or necrotic damage to their attacks.
So they're not just hitting hard, they're also hitting with holy or unholy power.
Exactly, and the damage scales with their level, so it's always relevant.
And they also get Warrior of the Gods at 3rd level.
Which replaces the free resurrection ability from the 2014 edition.
Okay, so what do they get instead?
They get a pool of d12s equal to their barbarian level, and they can expend these dice as a bonus action to heal themselves.
So they have a way to keep themselves topped off in the middle of combat.
Exactly. It's a more proactive form of healing than just waiting for a spellcaster to heal them.
And then at 6th level, they get Fanatical Focus.
Which lets them add their rage damage bonus to saving throws they make while raging.
So they're even harder to take down with spells and effects.
Exactly. They're incredibly resilient.
And then at 10th level, they get Zealous Presence.
Which lets them grant advantage on attack rolls and saving throws to an ally within 30 feet for 1 minute.
So they can buff their team like the Wild Heart, but it's a more concentrated burst of power.
Exactly. And it can be used once per long rest for free, or they can spend a rage to use it again.
So it's a powerful ability, but it's also limited.
You need to use it wisely.
And finally, at 14th level, they get Rage of the Gods.
Which replaces Rage Beyond Death from the 2014 edition.
So what does it do?
It gives them a fly speed equal to their walking speed for 1 minute, once per day.
So they can take to the skies and smite their enemies from above.
Exactly. It's a fittingly powerful ability for a subclass that's all about divine wrath.
So the Zealot is a really interesting blend of damage dealing, self-healing, and support.
They're a great option for players who want to play a holy warrior with a touch of primal fury.
Well, that was a whirlwind tour of the Barbarian class and all its subclasses in the 2024 edition.
We covered a lot of ground, but hopefully it was helpful.
It was fascinating to see how they've updated and refined this class. It's still the classic raging warrior we all know and love, but it's even more versatile and powerful now.
And there are so many different ways to play it, depending on your preferred play style and the specific needs of your party.
Exactly. Whether you want to be a pure damage dealer, a tactical mastermind, a supportive tank, or a divine champion, there's a barbarian subclass out there for you.
So for all of you listeners out there who are thinking about playing a barbarian in your next campaign, I hope this deep dive has given you a better understanding of what this class is all about.
We've looked at the core class features, the rage mechanic, the new weapon mastery system, and all 4 primal paths.
And now it's up to you to decide how you're going to unleash your inner fury.
Will you embrace the relentless assault of the Berserker, the adaptable power of the Wild Heart, the controlling presence of the World Tree, or the divine wrath of the Zealot?
The choice is yours.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of the 2024 Barbarian.
And until next time, may your rage be ever in your favor.
It's a good one. All right, we'll see you next time.